Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Babbling Pastor podcast with the best host that you have ever had, ever in your. I mean,
Mhm.
I know you've got some good hosts. I know you've got some good podcasts, but this is like the best. Michael and
Yeah,
Rob.
yeah, and Rob, yeah. I'm well, I can't even keep up yeah. I don't know. I'm lost. I lost it. I can't even keep up with that lie that he just told.
I think
Uh,
we're pretty good host over here. I mean, come on. I mean, like we'll cuddle you up like a little baby and rock you to sleep and. Well, I don't know if I want to cuddle you up. I guess that's
yeah,
now we're into territory of uncomfortableness.
you know what we don't have is one of those cool like um wooden tables that's been stained like perfectly and like a couple of mics on these like fancy
Yeah,
things, and like different camera angle. Like, yeah, I don't know.
that's
We're
true.
not competing with a lot of people because we're not,
Or-
like pouring 15 grand into this every week.
Well, we're also not in the same room, so I think that has a bit to do with it too. Like, yeah. Now, hold on. We do have this though. Ready? Ready? We've got some sound effects.
Oh,
I mean, we've got some of that. If we want to, hey,
that's great, Michael.
oh no, in the wrong way. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Audience, what do you think about it? Yes. Yes, I knew. Thank you, audience. Okay. So, yes, that was all the toys. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. This week, or not this week, this set of podcasts we're doing, I decided to torture Rob. So what we're going to be doing is, because in case you don't listen often to the podcast, which I don't know why you wouldn't, but Rob doesn't get on the internet much. Would that be, pretty
So
accurate?
I don't get on social media much.
Okay.
I mean, I'm
Yes.
constantly on the internet, obviously,
Yeah.
um and looking at relevant things to my regular audience, right? So there's a lot of YouTube and keeping up with news and that sort of thing. But as far as jumping into the cesspool of Twitter and TikTok and progressive Christianity, I no, I'm unfamiliar largely with some of that stuff.
So today, I thought what better idea to do than the next 4 episodes is just get Rob into that. Just bring him in to
Yeah.
into the terribleness that is Twitter. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be going through these next 4 episodes, each episode looking at a tweet that when I saw, I thought Rob would love this. He would totally agree with this. Why would he not want to read this and bask in the glory of this? So we're going to be going through, reacting to the tweets, talking about them, because to be quite frank, I get sent them all the time because of the Honest Youth Pastor. Rob's youth group probably interacts a little bit more on Twitter than me or him, or at least they do on TikTok or other social media that I'm too old for, and and some of these type of ideas come up on that. So we're gonna jump right over to the reaction screen here. So this particular one here is just a tweet from a guy named Josh. We're not obviously going to promote any of these tweets as far as the person, but I wanted to keep him on there for transparency's sake. And Josh tweeted out the other day. He said this: in what has become a dominant Christian interpretation, God isn't actually merciful. God's wrath just shifts from all humans to one human, that being Jesus. What a terrible idea. Penal substitutionary atonement is the equivalent of profaning God's name. I mean, I figure you agree with that, Rob. Would that be an accurate statement? Like, you're like, hey, me and Josh are buddies.
I'm trying to. Okay, I agree with one phrase
Okay, hey,
that this
common
has
ground.
become a dominant Christian interpretation. Although no, I can't even say that because this has been a dominant Christian interpretation of the scriptures for, well, since Paul, I would presume. Um, yeah, this is actually not that uncommon. This struggle that people have with penal substitution,
Mm-hmm.
um,
I
because
think,
it seems pretty like when we think about it. so I think about it in terms easily of like me and my son, right? And that seems pretty barbaric and evil to think about,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, I get the concern. I get the concern. Is this is I'm assuming something you run into a lot.
Yeah, well, so much. It's more now than before. I'd say. I mean, in my time of running the account, this really pushback against penal substitutionary atonement is within the last like 3 years, like an average probably. Like I never used to hear anything about it before. And then within the last probably 3-4 years, it's kind of come like this whole terminology, like cosmic child abuse, that sort of terminology has come more around than it was before. To where now,
Yeah.
like it's sort of picked up pace to where now this idea of penal substitutionary atonement is like almost unthinkable, like from what you would consider like the progressive crowd or the evangelical crowd, like the people that used to go to church but don't anymore. It's kind of picked up steam in that category because of kind of like you said, the shifting of lenses to where I don't know if you call it shifting of lenses, but this idea of like, well, yeah, but if I'm talking about that with my kid, this sounds terrible. Why would I do that?
Hmm.
Like, and
Yeah.
that's where the thought process really seems to go of this idea. And then they will pick up, just like to be transparent, like the research I've done on it, as far as like this type of thinking, they'll pick up on like early medieval Catholic theologians, kind of working through the 5-6 views of atonement, and then stating that as they work through this wasn't technically the first view of atonement in regards to development of those theories within the Catholic, like early church Catholic theology. I think it's like, if I remember right, like third or fourth. But they'll
Mm.
usually default back to, and I don't know anything about, I don't know a ton about Josh's theology. I did do one sermon review on him, but I
Oh, he's
believe,
okay.
yeah, no, yeah, he's a pastor in Nashville of openly progressive church. And so I think he defaults back to the example, the idea of Jesus being the example, prime example that we're supposed to follow after, yada yada yada. I mean, which again, not a bad, not a bad atonement theology, but not the only one, as far as that goes. Like there's a lot that can work together there. But yeah, so that's where we're at. So this is just like sort of a generalization here. This is definitely something that has come about more recently, as far as the pushback to penal substitutionary atonement.
Okay. Can you put that back up real
Oh
quick on
yeah,
the
sorry.
screen?
Yep.
So, there are a couple of things with this particular tweet. I mean, so I just on the general idea of penal substitution being like bad or monstrous or that sort of thing. We can tackle that in a second, but there are a couple of things that I notice about what he's saying, um, that uh, that might not be uh, the same necessary. So let me just come out with it. So when he says God's wrath shifts from all humans to one human, Jesus, um, so that's true, in the sense that Jesus was truly and really human, that he put on our skin. But this question assumes that Jesus was like any other human, sort of, right? Like, so this question assumes that Jesus was just a human, and God shifted all of his wrath onto one human. First of all, I'm a Calvinist, so I don't think that God shifted all of the wrath for all of the sins on Jesus. But the idea being that he, like that, for instance, you and me, that the wrath of God that would have been poured out on us was poured out on Jesus, some other human who didn't deserve it. And so that doesn't seem very fair to Jesus, right? And that seems like the something from that one phrase um, that he said. And like, but the one that bugs me the most is what a terrible idea. Now I know that progressive Christianity, the inerrancy, infallibility, even trustworthiness in general of the scriptures is kind of not a thing. Am I right?
It really depends on who you talk to. I mean, so
Okay.
to get a very broad brush here that I think is fair and equal, I would say that they would say that the scriptures are inspiring in regards to good ways to live life, but they are not necessarily inspired by God
Mm,
in the classical sense that orthodoxy would kind of dictate.
right. And so the struggle with that is, first of all, that viewpoint. I don't want to spend really much time on that, other than to say that that viewpoint really, at the end of the day, puts that on the same level as about a 100,000 other books that have been written, right? If
Yeah,
it's
pretty
just
close. Yeah.
inspiring. But what a terrible idea assumes that either this is not anywhere in the scriptures or found in the scriptures, or it assumes that it is found in the scriptures, but the scriptures are not absolute truth when it comes to this. It seems to be that it would be one or the other of those, or maybe a mixture of both. I don't know, but um,
Well, it
those.
also
So
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go
It
ahead.
ignores a lot of the Old Testament setup in regards to how sacrifice was how even worked, and it was
Yeah.
dictated in the Old Testament for the Israelites. So
hmm Yeah, I mean the list of scriptures for penal substitution is lengthy. If you want to, um, so Isaiah 53, even in the Old Testament, right? Like there's a whole lot of this penal substitution idea found in Isaiah 53. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him, that's Jesus in the future, but 700 years in the future, the iniquity of us all. Um, 2 Corinthians 5:21, for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. 1 John 2:2, he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. And I mean, Jesus, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. So like the list is just, it's unending. So it's difficult. It would be a really difficult case, I think, for someone to say, with for someone to actually do research and look at the scriptures and then come out saying this concept is not in the scriptures, because it's literally bleeding from the, I mean, it's all over the place. Um, and so I think, as we think about penal substitution, being one of the, not the first or second or whatever developed, um, written on paper theological way to think about the atonement. I think, maybe that's true in the sense that theologians didn't write that particular idea down, or begin to speak about it or whatever, until a certain date. But this began a long, long, long time ago. In fact, I don't know what the, uh, I think it would be hard to prove the purpose for the sacrifices like you could in the Israel, in Israel's system. But I mean, even Cain and Abel sacrificed to the Lord, right? Noah, after the flood, what does he do? The very first thing he does is, let the animals out and build an altar and sacrifice to the Lord, right? So animal sacrifices, this kind of thing happened long before Abraham was even thought of in human terms. And so this has been going on for a long, 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 long time, right? And especially when we jump into the history of Israel, which begins in Genesis 12, and then when you get into Exodus, for sure, and then Leviticus and all the rest. The Leviticus is a good book for it, because Leviticus, you cannot escape the idea that there is a penal substitution uh, um, uh, involved, and really, it's the most glaring version of substitution, or of atonement. rather. And so it's been around since, well, a long time ago, since the beginning in
Yeah.
some fashion, right? And then the other misconception. So there are two things I think that are misconceptions that really lead us down a path that could lead to this kind of thinking, that Josh is displaying in this tweet, and that's, one, Jesus is God. Jesus, from eternity past, Jesus already knew and consented freely to do what he did. And so the beautiful thing about the story is, not that this big mean dad did this awful thing to his son for the sake of strangers. That's not the story at all. The story is God became a man, and put on our skin, wore did the things that we did every day. He had to eat, he had to sleep, he prayed to the Father. So God became a human, and he said, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. I'm free to lay it down, and I'm free to take it up again. Jesus was absolutely free to do or not do what he knew he was about to do. And uh, God gave his life. God absorbed his own wrath, essentially, for those who would be saved. And that's the beauty of the story. So there is a penal substitution. It's just not the same monstrosity that it would be if I sacrificed my son for it, because he's not a human. If I did that, it would be evil, right? But my son and I am not the same being, right? And so that it's not the same thing. It's categorically different than us thinking about it. One of the problems that we have, typically, and this is true, for all Christians. I think we all struggle with this, that we tend to take God and put him in human like we think about him in human terms. So predestination, right? If I did that, that would be evil, right? And so when we think about predestination, we automatically go, man, that sounds evil of God to do. But it's not the same thing, because he's not me, right?
Yeah, well, and I
Um,
think what you're saying there is incredibly important as far as the lenses. Oftentimes, I mean, we do Tuesday night live streams, and we were talking about Old Testament versions of marriage and things like that. And one of the things that came up was the same thing you're mentioning here. Like, we read back into the text our perception of how things are, right? So, like you said, it sounds evil because if I do that to my kid, it's an absolutely terrible thing to do. But when,
mhm,
again, you're reading things onto the text or onto a theology from a perspective that's
yeah.
not incredibly helpful, and it's actually, yeah, it makes sense that it sounds bad whenever we do it.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, as far as that last sentence, penal substitutionary atonement is the equivalent of profaning God's name. I think so. All of this is a matter of the perspective from which you're looking, the lenses through which you're looking, like you were just talking about. Um, so I would say, that based on Orthodox Christian, like what Christians have believed forever, right? Based on Orthodox Christianity, um, him saying that this is just some sort of terrible idea that arrived from the ether is the equivalent of profaning God's name. Because this is something, again, that has been the case since the beginning, since Genesis 3:15, after the problem had occurred in human history. And then God, almost immediately comes on the scene and says, "Oh my goodness, what did you do?" Right? And then they tell him, and he starts laying out what this means now, the curse. And then, in that, he says, Genesis 3:15, the very first mention that we have of the gospel to come, of the idea that God would come and redeem people, that there would be a way made, right? And from that moment, even when we see, Abraham enter the picture in Genesis 12, which would become eventually Israel, the seed through which God would bless the nations, the whole world eventually. It all points back to that one thing in which God was going to eventually redeem mankind. And so from the very beginning is what I'm saying, right? From the very beginning, there's this idea that we would be redeemed, right? And to rightly understand, you if you don't believe in penal substitution, it's because I think you, first of all, you don't take the scriptures seriously, which could be the case, right? At least not in the sense that God intends us to take the scriptures seriously. Um, eh, um, and or you you are you have wrong ideas about God's wrath, about God's mercy and grace. Mercy, uh, God isn't actually merciful, is absolutely untrue. Even if uh, even in the instance of penal substitution, it's he talks about it being shifted from a bunch of humans to one human. But again, he misses the fact that this human is also God himself, and
Yeah, the
and
wording there is
he's
one
doing it
human, not one
freely.
God man. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it could have
Right.
that I don't want to make assumptions, but the idea here, yeah, one little word there could have shifted up kind of the meaning there.
Yep. Yeah. It's actually um, more correct biblically to say God's wrath just shifts from all humans to himself. That would be, so this is like turn the other cheek, right? When we hear the scripture turn the other cheek, we don't necessarily think about all the implications or where that idea comes from or whatever. We just think, okay, pacifist, got it. I'm not going to go to war, whatever that might mean, right? For your application, it's this idea that look, someone has sinned against you, right? Someone slaps you on the face. They've sinned against you. Rather than slapping them back, which would be justice, right?
Yeah,
Rather
equal
than
return,
slapping
yeah.
them back, which would be just, they've earned that, they've asked for that, you absorb that, in yourself and turn your other cheek so that they can slap that one too. That the justice still has to be served, someone still has to be punished for the sin they've just committed, it's just that you're absorbing the punishment. So even that turning the other cheek is a picture of the atonement theory, the of penal substitution. It's a picture of us sinning against holy God and God deciding to turn the other cheek, God deciding to simply absorb his own wrath, like pour his own wrath out on himself essentially, um to save. It doesn't get more merciful than penal substitutionary atonement.
I feel like I need to be in a megachurch right now and be like, that's so good, Pastor.
Yeah,
That's what,
you
yeah.
got an organ thing. You got to work on that organ.
I don't have an organ. Man, I do need to work on that, don't I? Yeah, I don't have an organ. In fact, I had an
I'm
air
just kidding.
horn, and the air horn's not even working right now. I was pushing it, nothing was occurring. So it's just like yeah, forget it. But no, I think that's I think that's good in regards to. Oh, hold on, here we go. I think I got it now. There you go. So, no,
There it
yeah,
is.
I think that's helpful in distinguishing in regards to what we're looking at. And a quick answer to that. I think again, there's a lot more you could go into there, but I think that was a good sort of summary there. So
Yeah.
we're gonna end this episode on that. The idea is whenever it comes up as far as penal substitution, knowing the Bible, knowing as far as the Old Testament, how that worked, the words that Paul uses especially, and describing that and building that out as far as in the New Testament, explaining that to them. And just knowing that you're going to run across people that say things like we saw in the tweet from Josh, but again, not making sure we don't read our perception of like how life works onto the scripture. in the times that we're, because again, like you said, it's going to sound terrible, and it would be terrible if you did that, but you're not God. We're not God, and God operates in a certain way and has laid things out in a certain way, and knowing the scriptures that way, I think is going to help. It's not going to eliminate all of the questions and all the issues, but it is going to help you understand and perceive those things better. So, guys, hopefully that was helpful. We'll be back next week with another tweet that Rob was just gonna love. We'll talk to you later.
I'm sure. See ya.
Bye.